Going?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, welcome to our podcast. Today we're going to be talking about drugs and where do we cut the line. My name's Alyssa and I'm against drug legalization.
I'm Master and I'm against drug legalization.
And then my name is Haley. Welcome to the podcast. And we are for legalizing drugs because we feel like they can be consumed in a safer way.
And I'm Cora, and I'm also for legalizing drugs. So, who here has experienced someone doing drugs or has done drugs? Does anyone?
A few months ago during homecoming, me and my friends, we ran out of a party bus, and one of my friends started acting like a little bit crazier than she normally does. And I was just like, oh, she's having fun. It's a fun night. But then later on, I found out that she was doing
Acid.
I can never remember what it's called.
The acid tablets or whatever.
Yeah. Now she was doing acid. And I feel like she took two because they're like, I'm just taking more. I'm like, okay, you're a little crazy. All right.
But she was having a good time.
She was having a good time. I mean, so was I, but I wasn't on drugs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy to me. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like as teenagers, we kind of were in that environment where a lot of people that are around are doing drugs and consuming drugs because they think it's fun and we're young and our frontal lobes aren't developed completely, so we do stupid stuff. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people have experiences with drugs because they think it's fun and we're young and our frontal lobes aren't developed completely, so we do stupid stuff. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people have experiences with either personal or someone that does drugs. For me personally, my ex-boyfriend was heavily taking drugs and he was popping pills. It got so bad to the point where he OD'd and had to go to rehab. So that was a fun time in my life, but it just all depends on the person. Like you said, your friend had a great time doing acid because they thought it was fun, but some people abuse it and it gets bad where they have to go to rehab. So yeah,
to piggyback on that, I had a friend at the time in my freshman year, and he carried a lot of, I don't want to say baggage, but a lot of problems. So he kind of would throw it all on me. He would consistently try and tell me that he's gonna kill himself, or just make up things to stress me out, that he got a girl pregnant. He would literally make it all up, and he was on drugs all the time, and he would I had to stop talking to him because of how much he was affecting me and the people around him. So that kind of just shows that drugs not only affect the person, but the loved ones and people around them. So it's definitely legalizing them would make it a lot more accessible, I feel and just make it more normalized for people to have to go through these experiences.
Yeah, so kind of to shift over, how does legalizing these kinds of drugs change this dynamic and change these situations?
well, obviously for the people we've known and the experiences I personally had, it has all been people that are underage getting drugs. But if they were legalized for adults, that can be can change the dynamic completely for people to be able to consume them safely, and it being these drugs being made in a more controlled environment rather than them having to be illegally smuggled in, and the access to everything would just be a lot safer than how people are getting drugs now, because that could be honestly the leading cause of why young teenagers are how they're getting these drugs, because it is illegal for everyone. So that's why they're getting it in an unsafe way as well.
I agree with the adult part of it, that for adults who would be able to take these drugs, the accessibility would make it safer. But I still feel for kids who are no matter what not going to be able to take these drugs due to age limits, they're still going to be having to sneak around and get these drugs from plugs and stuff who could easily make it unsafe again, lace it and stuff. So I feel although it may help the adults, it's still going to be the same type of problems that we're facing right now with the children. And according to caddyinc.org, increasing the availability will increase negative health consequences in many young people. So, I definitely think it's going to be like a huge, I think it's going to just stay the same in that sense for young children or teenagers.
Yeah. Well, and I know definitely drugs aren't good for you. Obviously, they come with health complications, but I mean, people are still going to be doing drugs, even if they're not legalized, because obviously they're not legalized right now, and people are still doing them. But according to Joseph Kane, when drugs are illegal, it can lead to gang wars, a growing disrespect for law, astronomical illegal profits, corrupted law enforcement, and then obviously sickness and death from impure substances. So I think that by allowing them to be legalized, that it makes them safer, and obviously for people to obtain, but also the makeup of the drugs.
I feel like it's a little bit of a false hope to have drugs be legalized in that manner, because everything's gonna be quote unquote safer for everybody taking the drugs. Because I feel like when you legalize drugs, there's industries and competitions to make the best drugs, and there's gonna be corporations that are gonna be feeding off of people and off of the money. And honestly, I was reading an article called Drug Legalization of False Hope, and the doctor says the greatest mortality from drugs comes from legal drugs. So are we just gonna have more people dead because drugs are legalized? That's my question.
So in that sense, is that more like pharmaceutical drugs that are prescribed to people?
No.
Or is that just from legalized drugs? So what is that? What drugs fall under that category?
It wouldn't be
pharmaceutical
pharmaceutical
as well.
drugs, because they are mediated by a doctor and they are put in smaller quantities. It's not gonna just be drugs off the. It's just drugs off the street that are gonna be the ones that are overdosed. People
But then
don't.
the ones, so what exactly are you saying? Which drugs that are legal are really causing a lot of these?
I don't know. If you're like a cancer patient, for example, they have to take certain drugs to make themselves feel better and healthier and help them overcome cancer. But it's a doctor is giving out doses, like a simple amount this time, and you come back and you go back home to take those drugs, but it's not those drugs that are killing people and that people are overdosing on. It's street drugs people can just take or get from plugs.
Yeah, so if drugs are legalized, then they could possibly get them from those sources, and even in healthcare as well, to reduce that factor of people dying of drugs, just that they're getting out on the street. And I don't want to disregard that. Yes, drugs are bad for you, but it's not what we're arguing, because we know they have a big effect on your health. But like you were saying, how lost my train of thought, but how you were saying your point before that, you were saying something along the lines of,
I was talking about adults versus children, or was it after that, or just legalizing them
I
with the
completely
mortality? Okay, well, I'll ask a question.
Yeah, I completely lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere. It'll come back to me. Come
Okay,
back
well,
to me on
I
that
was
one.
gonna ask okay, well now you can talk about what you just said right now, because I was gonna ask you something what you had just said. What were you saying?
I was saying.
Bro, you're on that thought.
Wait, what were you saying? I was
Too
gonna ask
soon,
you
too
a
soon.
question.
No, I actually had a good point. I forgot what it was.
Right.
Oh wait,
I
so
did.
are you saying that if you legalize drugs, the drugs that are being legalized are only going to be used, or only going to be prescribed by a doctor, or are they just going to be only over the counter, or at drugstores?
yes.
Where how is that going to work?
And that's the logistics of it that I am unsure of, but they can be in a more controlled environment. I think that was the main point that we were trying to...
I think if you're gonna legalize drugs, then also talking about impurities. I know that you had a story about how you're explaining how they were made in South America, and it was just really gross and unsafe and everything. And I think by legalizing them in the United States, like, you allow factories and companies to make these drugs, you know what I mean? And like, we're lucky enough to have the FDA, so like the FDA could regulate and stuff like that. And like, I know when you go and you buy, like, if you go buy weed like in a cartridge from a dealer or whatever, there's a scannable barcode on it, and that proves to you like this is safe, it's not laced, it hasn't been tampered with, and it gives you that like insurance that what you're consuming is safe and it's not going to kill you. Because like,
what about those like addicts who, you know, are consistently getting those drugs and have the intention of, you know,
Abusing
not
them.
overdosing, but like there's always that factor, you know?
but usually, like, I feel like a common overdose that's happening now is fentanyl, right? We know that because the drugs that these people are getting and taking are laced with amounts of fentanyl that are too high. And so if we were able to produce drugs in the United States and have them be like approved and safe, then these instances wouldn't be an issue.
So you want them to be like not as concentrated?
Yeah, like that kind of, or even just making sure that they are safe and that what people are buying is what they're taking. So,
And I feel like that opens up the accessibility to drugs to everybody, because you were talking about like pharmaceutical companies or like just like even like regular companies in the United States having been producing drugs for them to be made safer.
yeah.
But I feel like that opens up to a larger group of people, such as children, who are very easily influenced by their peers and adults. And if they see that like drugs are safe, or like you can just take little quantities, quote, they're gonna be wanting to try it, because they're gonna be like, oh, it's legal and it's okay, even though we know that drugs are not safe whatsoever.
Yeah, but I think if, like, let's say if I wanted to walk into a dispensary and they were selling Coke, I'm obviously these drugs because I'm underage, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And of course I could go and obtain them from a plug, but it's likely that this plug is going to be obtaining it from a like dispensary. I don't even know what you would call it, like
Somewhere safer.
somewhere
than
safer. Yeah.
Having to smuggle it.
corporation.
Is that what
Yeah.
you're trying to say?
I remembered my point now, because I was going to say it's inevitable that young people and everyone is going to, we can't get away from the factor that people are going to do drugs. And we can't eliminate all the plugs and all of these drugs that are getting smuggled in, but I definitely feel like some of them at least would be eliminated, and that risk factor will be reduced by a lot.
Yeah, I just kind of like, I understand what you guys are saying, where like overall it'll make it safer, but like it's still just kind of like, I just still feel like this can just like have like a downward spiral where like with more addicts, you know, there's just more like just more harm morally, like you're just like affecting a lot more people in the future, like. And then like I was even like reading like on addiction center, like just like for rehab, it's from like $1,000 to like $60,000. Like I feel like that's a lot of like what's the word? There's just a lot of like responsibility you're putting on your loved ones if you are gonna, you know, go down that path. And I feel like making them legalized is like making that path like much more open to people, if that makes sense. So I just think that just kind of worries me, and like
And I feel like we pretend, I know we all know drugs are bad, but I feel like we're pretending that because we're going to legalize it, everything's going to be okay because we're going to get it safer. But then we have to like look at the effects of drugs and how it affects each person individually, because we're all different. We can lash out, or we don't know what we're doing half the time we're doing drugs. I was reading an article on EBSCO from Mount SAC website, and the amount of it takes to like trigger an abusive moment or fight or response is very small for some people. And I feel like if we're just letting everybody do drugs, and of course like Haley, you were saying that like no matter what, it's inevitable, children are going to get their hands on drugs. What is the world that we're going to be looking at? Just everybody just being crazy after just taking all these drugs, or just like I don't know how we're going to make it a safe place environment after.
I feel like that's like kind of an extreme like thought,
Mm-hmm.
and that, I mean, there's functioning people in society who do drugs. You know, it's
But I feel like, but that's like some drugs, not like all extreme crazy drugs that
Yeah.
they're doing all the time, you know.
Well, I know I said we weren't going to touch on alcohol, but it's kind of a little bit of the same concept of a less extreme version of alcohol is legal for people over the age of 21, obviously, but you don't see people out here being drunk. So that's like just drunk, like out in public all the time and coming to workplace drunk. I mean, who knows? Maybe someone out there definitely has before, but that's why we have those regulations. That would probably be in the same place as drugs. You're not gonna be able to be openly just taking drugs out in public. Then again, I don't know all those policies that would be enforced with this legalization of drugs, but I think the extreme that you're thinking of is you're painting a picture that it just wouldn't be.
Yeah, well, and I can like personally say my dad, it was way before my parents decided to have me, but my dad, he fell into taking drugs, and his drug of choice was meth. And I mean, he's a really successful man now. And I mean, even back then when he was on these substances, he was maintaining a job and supporting himself. So I think that it's definitely something that drug users are able to do, is they can still fend for themselves and live life, you know, and be functioning members of society.
So it depends on each individual. I guess.
Yeah, totally. And I think that for those individuals who are affected and can't support themselves, I guess you could say, if you are going to be able to sell drugs legally in the United States, that also means with these purchases, taxes are going to come. And so tax money could go to providing benefits for these people.
I see the money part of it, like how it is good economically, but like I can't help but think about like the fact that there's like other ways we can try and fix that.
Yeah.
And I just think that drugs should be like the last resort, because like I just feel like there's just too many risks that comes with that for the benefit of like, you know, finances in America or something, you know. I just feel like there's other ways we can get there without having to like legalize all these hardcore drugs. I don't know. I just feel like morally that should be like the last thing that we should like put up for discussion to help our economic stance.
I don't think it's necessarily like with the intention of helping our economy. I think it's a precautionary thing. If these people are going to need help, that we have money now from this, I guess, like whatever you would call it, this category of tax money, you know?
Yeah, I can back that up because I was reading a case study of just looking up statistics and tax revenue in California, and it said that states with legalized marijuana markets have collected millions of dollars just in state tax revenue. So just by the legalization, that was millions of dollars that we didn't have before because of marijuana being illegally smuggled in and illegally consumed. So that's just a benefit that could help our economy as well.
But then, so is the benefit is just so we're just using these people to get taxes to just help the economy in the U.S.?
No, I wouldn't necessarily using them. I would say if they're already consuming these drugs illegally, it's not only being them doing it illegally is a health concern, but that's the benefit of doing them legally as well.
No,
So
but I feel like them doing them illegally kind of feeds into like the taboo part of drugs, and that it's not okay, and again helps children see that it's not like a good thing to do no matter what, and so like I feel like after legalizing it, it's like people are not going to see like, oh, these drugs aren't really that bad, they're just there, like you said before, they're just like alcohol, like they're not like an everyday thing. So I don't know how it would.
yeah, I would say going back to just the tax part, I would disagree on your saying that we're just using them, because I don't think using American citizens to get money off of doing drugs is exactly the purpose of it. It's more looking out for their safety rather than looking out, oh, how can I make more money?
Well, I think she's just saying that with that, it makes it normalized in a way that we might not want, because, you know, we don't, obviously, we're doing this to make it safer, but with that, it could lead into, like, people just, you know, making it like an everyday thing for themselves, and that's just, I don't know, I think that's what she's just trying to say, that drugs is right now illegal for a reason. So if we make it legal, maybe people will start taking it more normally, and like, I don't know, that could like lead to a lot
No,
of
I agree.
different
Like, I feel like there are steps to take before we take the extreme of just legalizing every drug. You know?
Yeah, maybe we start off with like the less harmful drugs that, I don't know, I don't know, I think that could just...
Yeah, it's actually really interesting that you guys are saying that, because this case study is actually, I found it very interesting because it was the effects of marijuana and legalization, and even though it was just within the past 5 to 10 years, they haven't seen a huge, they were studying like things like road safety, suicide rates, even things like, let me look it up, like crime rates, and they thought, people were predicting that they were going to see a huge increase in crime and accidents and suicides, but the data has not been dramatic at all. So I think that's a good thing of like easing their way into it with legalizing marijuana. And within the past 10 years, there hasn't been that dramatic of, statistically, of harm.
Yeah.
So that was something that I had to consider as well.
I mean, I don't know what it is, because I'm not too informed with it, but like, I agreed with the legalization of marijuana, because me personally, like, I just didn't see it as being as bad as like cocaine and meth, like, but like, you know, like I said, I'm not very informed, so I could be wrong, and like it could have bad effects, but in my head, like, I understand, you know, people use it for like medical use, like just to relax, like these drugs like do not make people like completely go batshit crazy, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like other drugs, like you see homeless people, like they're on that hardcore shit, like talking to themselves. Like, in my opinion, I don't see weed doing that to yourself. You're just kind of like, oh, I'm
Relaxed.
hungry, or oh, like, let me just do something like fucking crazy weird, you know, like, like I don't know, I just feel like, from my perspective, seeing other drugs, I just feel like it's got a like crazier outcome than just marijuana.
And I would agree with you on that, actually, because
I feel like too, though, I think in homeless people, like, it's more dramatized because some struggle like with mental health, and two, they're probably like constantly just like taking a hit, like, you know. So
yeah, I agree that mental health definitely has a lot to do with that. But since there are like a lot of mentally ill people, and especially in homeless people, because it's like hard for them, like I feel like without accessibility, like, you know, it could just make it like a lot worse, maybe. I'm not sure.
Well, and I think that also opens up the debate to like what kind of drugs would we be open to legalizing, you know, because like there's a book like right there, it's like staring at me, it's called Opium, and I'm actually gonna go pick it up. Because like obviously, like, you know, you have coke and you have meth, but you also have opioids that like come from doctors, and that's usually how people obtain them.
And I think that was a very interesting point that you brought up, Cora, about the opioids and like morphine and stuff like that coming from doctors and them like giving them out to patients, because then it got me thinking and researching about the war on drugs and how it came to be from President Nixon. So in the 19th century, during the war, a lot of soldiers were using opium and morphine as a medication, but the thing is, they got addicted to it, and then it got out of control. Then it was sold under illegal manner, as all drugs are being sold right now. And then the president decided to do a war on drugs so that we wouldn't have a lot of people being addicted, and then them being put on a straight up drug. Hold on. It was to drug policies that were intended to discourage like production and distribution of drugs, so that we wouldn't have so many people being addicted. And then there was a short What is it?
A short
No,
wait, what?
no.
Timeline?
Drug facilities to help you.
Oh, dispensaries?
No.
Rehab?
Thank you. I
Rehabilitation?
don't know why I
Rehab.
cannot remember that word.
Oh.
Yeah. So then, after they were having rehab for people that were addicted
Uh-huh.
after the war, so then they wouldn't happen again because it had such a negative impact on society and its people.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
From like a historical standpoint, I feel like it just taught us like a lesson on like there were drugs and they were not legal in a manner, but they were being used, and then there were problems that arose, and that's why in the future and in the now we do not allow drugs to be legalized.
So yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. So we're gonna introduce our guest speaker, Miss Karen. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Karen. Very happy to be here on the pod with these lovely ladies. So my, I guess, point is I am not for legalizing drugs, almost of any kind, just because of, I know like Aster, she had a really good point, just based off of history, like a lesson was to be learned and a lesson was taught, and I mean there were doctors who were giving these soldiers very strong drugs in a sense of like they were being used as medication, but it actually did end up affecting them much worse. And like this is even seen, this still can sometimes happen now. Very like terminal patients who are in hospitals typically go and they're prescribed like opioids or
Like painkillers.
like really really strong painkillers, and although
Xanax?
yeah, and
Shit
although
like
it
that.
can help in the moment, if they ever do end up getting to leave the hospital, they are faced with loads of addiction problems, and I just think that there could be a better way to go about it. And in terms of like, I guess like more used drugs and like teenagers and young adults, and I feel like that is like marijuana. I honestly don't really know too many drugs myself, but like I know marijuana is like very like popular amongst like teens and young adults, and then like pills, acid, shrooms, that type of jazz. And I know that a lot of people say they do drugs to, not everyone obviously, but majority to kind of help cope with any mental illnesses or mental issues that they might be facing, or PTSD, trauma. That's definitely a very like reoccurring thing going on like in our generation today with mental health issues. And although causation does not equal correlation, stimulant drugs have been linked to cause symptoms of depression, anxiety, and paranoia. So although we can't actually put like a finger on it and put the drugs to blame for these reasons, there have been several links to increased mental health issues because of becoming addicted to drugs. So I'm just not for legalizing drugs in any manner. But depending on the type of drugs, like obviously like medicine is a little bit different, and then that's kind of where we draw the line is, you know, how far does it go from being medicine and being prescribed in a safe and healthy amount to it causing worser effects such as leading to addiction and things like that.
So
That's like a gray area, and it's a hard line to draw.
I agree,
'cause
yeah.
Would you support, like I know you want to be a psychologist in the future,
Yeah.
but, and I know psychiatrist is different, but like, do you support medication for things like mental illness? Like,
I do.
okay.
I do support medication for things like mental illnesses, and that's, I mean, I did take a psychology class last year, and I am just kind of like interested in researching that, and I do feel that medication prescribed for mental illnesses can really, okay, quick little interruption, but we're back. So, as I was saying, mental health and just dealing with all different types of mental illnesses can really make living a challenge, and doing simple tasks every day it can really be a challenge. And I think if there's options such as medication that can be taken in safe, healthy amounts that do work for that person, all medication is different. So some people can have bad reactions to some medication. Really, I think it's important to have a trusted psychiatrist, a trusted doctor who can ensure that you're getting the right help you need. And maybe that's not even taking medication at all. Everyone's different, so it's really just making sure that you try everything until you find something that works for you and find medication that can attain to that person's needs.
Yeah, so recently in California, obviously marijuana has been legalized. So what are your thoughts on that? Because people use that medically and, like you said, try out different medications to find what works for them. And for some people, recently that is marijuana. So what are your thoughts on people using that for medical reasons?
I strongly believe that marijuana, if it is to be used, it should only be used for medical reasons, and that's prescribed by a doctor in a healthy, safe amount. If you're going to take it just as like any other medication. However, marijuana does contain THC, which is like an addictive chemical, which could, like I said, that lead to addictions and lead to a whole bunch of worse problems. So it's really just making sure that you're getting it in a safe amount that's not going to end with you getting addicted. But in terms of just like marijuana being legal for the pleasure of smoking it, I don't believe that it should be legal at all. And whether you're doing it to cope or whether you're doing it because it's fun, it causes a lot of health problems, like physical health problems as well as mental health problems. And yeah, I feel like with marijuana being legal, it almost encourages the need to excuse that it's okay that you're doing drugs because it's just marijuana. And I've heard that phrase quite commonly, oh, it's just marijuana. But at the end of the day, it's still a drug, it's still bad for you, and if you need it so much to the point to help you medically, then you need to be getting that in a professional way. And if you're not getting it in a professional way, then you should not be using it at all.
No, yeah, I definitely see that, like, in general, addiction is a really scary thing when it comes to, like, even prescribing it, because I know from personal experience, like, I had a lot of anxiety, so I had to, go to therapy and with a psychiatrist. Within the first call, within, like, 5-10 minutes, she had already prescribed me medication, which just kind of shows how, like, willing they are to just, kind of give drugs. So I feel like to add on that, if it were legalized, it could, it could only make that way, like, more, like, excessive, I guess. Not excessive, but, like they could just be giving out more drugs more normally. And I do think that's already becoming a problem because, like, I felt really, like, uncomfortable taking them just because, like, how are you already going to prescribe me medicine when we've only briefly talked for, like, 5-10 minutes? So I just feel like in the future, if it were legalized, maybe, like, that'll be more normal where they're just, like, throwing out drugs to you, here, this will help you,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think it's kind of a scary line when it comes to, like, the addiction part of it, because it's, like, they're going to easily give you that medicine and people can easily, like, take advantage of that and just say I'm this or I'm that, just to get those drugs. And with it being legalized, it just could be easier. I understand it's already a problem, but I do think it might make it worse.
I feel like Karen definitely, like, found our common ground of how, like, she's saying that, yes, obtaining it in a safe manner, like, by being prescribed by a doctor is, like, okay, but she's also very much, like, we shouldn't just be, cramming drugs down people's throats because that's, like, the easy alternative. And I definitely think that makes a lot of sense, and I would 100% agree.
And I also, she touched upon, like, the history about, like, doctors and stuff like that. And although we are very trusting of medical people, as we should, they've gone to school for many years and studied their craft.
Yeah.
But also we have to be careful of, like, what they give us. And how we use it, because we are still learning and we still don't know the effects of everything.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So I think we've all kind of come to a fair meeting ground. We definitely still have a lot to discuss, but I feel like that should conclude our podcast for today. And
Just understanding that it should be safe, but that there's also like limitations around it.
and then regardless, drugs are bad. We're not trying to argue that they're not, but just the effects of legalizing it was a great discussion today. I think.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for
Thank you
listening.
for listening.
Bye.